In the Open Seminary, we approach theological education in a different way. This doesn't make it right or wrong, it's just a different approach. In traditional theological education, you will spend a lot of time with the disciplines, the Old, New Testament, systematic theology, and so on. You'll learn how to apply that to church ministry. We inverted that process and we started to think about the various practices of the local church. Now, there are many that one could identify, but in church history, there's at least 5. There's the thing of leading and building a community, which is known as koinonia, or kerugma, to proclaim the gospel, or worship, which is liturgia, diakonia, which is service, and paideia, which is spiritual formation. But we know from contextual theology and the whole conversation about contextualization, and when we look at the Gospels and we see how Paul interacted with various communities in different ways, we know that a church must also contextualize. And so that too is a practice, and we call that theologia. Now, we see these practices as lenses. They are lenses that we put over eventually the disciplines and so on. And we focus on each one of these practices over a 21-week period. And each one of these practices will go through 3 parts, we can call it, or 3 steps. So the best way I can describe it is to perhaps give you an example. So imagine that we are doing koinonia and you are joining us. You'll be joining students who have been on this journey for a little while. And you'll form a cohort group and you'll study with them. We start by inquiring and immersing ourselves in the question that this practice raises for us. So we start in the practice, our experience, and we do a personal inquiry. We look deep within, and we go to our community and we do a social inquiry, and we begin to explore what are the concerns that we have. And as a cohort group, we discuss that and we debate that and we explore that. In this first phase, we are already joining online with one another. When we have come to some point where we feel like we understand the question, we then move to the traditional answers and we go to those traditions that I spoke about earlier. And we begin to explore what would the Old Testament say about this? What would the New Testament say about it? And so on. So for instance, we may look at the Pentateuch, where the people of Israel were formed as a community. We may look at Paul's epistles, pastoral epistles, to understand the church. We may go to systematic theology and understand the Trinity and the Trinity as a primal community, and so on. You get the idea. So in this step, we are integrating that learning, but we are also beginning to ideate, imagine how that knowledge could address our question. And in order to do that, we then spend some time with a thoughtful practitioner, and we go to this thoughtful practitioner and we spend 3 days with him or her, and we try to learn from this person how he or she has taken their understanding of the Old Testament, New Testament, systematic theology, and so on, and how they have imagined and ideated and integrated all of that to do the ministry of leading and building community. And so we get a thoughtful practitioner or two to help us reflect on that. This then sets us up for the 3rd phase of a study. And this phase we simply call implement and improvise. But we can't implement before we have improvised. Now the word improvise is really good because we need to improvise all the lectures we have received over the last 14 weeks, all the input we have received about the various readings, all the input that we have received from the thoughtful practitioners and so on. We now have to take this knowledge and improvise, make something of it. The word improvise suggests that our knowledge may be incomplete, our experience may be incomplete. We have what we have, a little bit like Moses. We have that staff, and that's what we have. It's in our hand, and we have to improvise a solution that we can then implement. Because we want to go back to practice. For us, we move from practice to practice. And so after we have improvised and we have written this operational theology, a theology that is pregnant with practical possibilities, a theology that we can put into practice, we implement those ideas. And let's say we came up with a conclusion that we needed to welcome our neighbor, or we needed to spend time with strangers, or whatever we came up with as part of our operational theology. We go prototype that, we go and experiment with that, and we move from theory to practice again, and we go from there again into a new phase of reflection. Imagine you do this process 6 times over. 6 times you get to think about the emerging question. 6 times you go to the Old Testament, New Testament systematic theology to answer and to find answers for the various practices that we're looking at. 6 times you are exposed to integrative seminars where you are meeting thoughtful practitioners. 6 times you create this operational theology and you put it into practice. Of course, through all of that you're going to gain huge amounts of knowledge. But I think what you'll gain, perhaps even more, is the ability to read yourself and your ministry context and to do theology for that context with that particular question in mind. I have been doing this for many years now. We started in 1999, and I have seen how this has impacted churches and individuals on 4 different continents. And there are videos on this website that will tell you the impact this program and this approach has had on folk over many years. I hope that this inspires you to do theology, and if you are so inclined and you feel this is right for you, that you will join us.